Hello and welcome to the Splitting Hairs podcast presented by Jackrabbit Illustrated. I'm Kyle, and today with me is Matt Anderson. Matt, how's it going?
Good, Kyle. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, indeed. I wanted to get a former player feature going before July. As we spoke off script, you're a service member, currently a part of the United States Air Force. So I wanted to dive into that. And with Tight End U going on in Nashville this weekend, wanted to capitalize on the tight end hype going on too. So there's a lot to cover. But first, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors who are renewing as title sponsors. So Drake's Place out in Bodle, South Dakota, very loyal, true blue members and supporters of the podcast. They're going to be renewing, as well as Cottonwood Coffee. Really appreciate their support. So we're going to be working on some unique things as far as content and have some exciting news to share on the Cottonwood front as well, as to some of the things that they're doing here in the future. So shout out to them. You guys go check them out. Bodle, South Dakota. That's Drake's Place. And then Cottonwood Coffee and Bistro in Brookings, South Dakota. So now that we've covered that, Matt, how are you? Where are you? And how's life?
I'm good. I'm in Denver now. Just got up here about a year ago after living in the Panhandle of Florida for almost a decade. We'll get into all that, but things are good. I'm married, got 3 kids running around. I'm hiding in the basement right now. I wouldn't be surprised at all if one of them comes down with some request or some need to show me some artwork or something. But yeah, I'm good, man. Just, doing my thing.
Excellent, man. So you were a part of a unique Jackrabbit era, kind of transitioning from the Division II ranks up through the Division I ranks. And you're a South Dakota kid yourself, correct? From Rapid City?
Yeah, I was an Air Force brat, but Ellsworth Air Force Base is in Rapid City, and my mom is from Rapid City, and my dad is from Sioux Falls. So Air Force brat, but we did live in Rapid City, and that's home for me. We lived in Colorado as well when I was younger, but Rapid is home.
Interesting. So for those folks who might come upon this podcast who are considering South Dakota State for their athletics careers, what's the difference between Western South Dakota and Eastern South Dakota, if you could encapsulate it? And now be kind, but be real, Be real.
And I was going to say, we'll make most of the audience mad 2 seconds in. Good start. I know. Western South Dakota, specifically the Black Hills, is a lot more, it's in the name hills, right? So there's a lot more terrain, a lot more mountainous. If you've spent time in Colorado, the Front Range of Colorado, it's a lot more of that type of a climate, a lot more mild than the eastern side. The temperature extremes are not as extreme. Walking to the hyper at 5:30 in the morning, it's not minus 40 in the wintertime, out in Rapid. But it's just different. It's not as much flat land. It's more mountainous, more woods and things like that. Both beautiful parts of the state. Half my family's from Sioux Falls area, and the other half lives out in Rapid. So I love them both. But I'm obviously a little biased to West River.
Yeah, no, the reason I bring that question up is because I was in awe at how beautiful West River is, the Black Hills, but also just like kind of awestruck by the Badlands out there as well. Yeah. And obviously they're not as there's nothing living in the Badlands really as far as like greenery, but it's quite a unique spectacle. And one I think everyone should check out. And and you got the farmlands on the eastern side of South Dakota, East River, as they say. Can you break that down for folks as well? West River, East River, what river are they talking about, and kind of what's the significance?
So it's almost like perfect for dividing the state. The Missouri River goes right through the middle of the state, and it's not exactly 50-50, but it's pretty close in terms of land area. And one thing that is kind of ironic, I've always thought this: people say West River and they kind of think Rapid City and the Black Hills. That's not all of West River. A lot of West River is similar to the eastern side of the state, flat, agricultural, etc. But the dominant feature is the Black Hills and the Badlands and Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse and all that kind of stuff. Not saying you should scoff the Corn Palace out east, but Mount Rushmore is pretty good, and the Black Hills are real neat. So that's the difference. But the Missouri River almost bisects the state like right down the middle. So it's a natural rivalry, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so Rapid City has, what is that? The second most populous city in the state?
Yeah, Rapid City is second most, and I don't know if they still do this, but they used to do it where the first letter, or excuse me, the first number on a license plate was the county you were from, and if you saw a 2, that was Pennington County, which was mostly Rapid City. You'd also see 49, which was Meade County, which was Sturgis in that area. But so Rapid City was 2, and 1 was Minnehaha County, which is Sioux Falls. So that would be a good way to identify where people are from. But they also, 1 being the most populous, 2 being second most, all the way down to, I don't know how many counties there are. I should have studied up a little more, but more than 49, I know that.
Interesting. And so, like, how did you come by, wanting to play football? Is that something that was ingrained in you early? I know there's so much to do West River that you had options, right? You could fish, you could hunt, you could, do a lot of other things. So what brought you to the gridiron?
Oh yeah, I was just regular, jock. Just wanted to play sports. Played all the sports. In high school, I narrowed it down to playing football and wrestling. And then it's actually kind of funny for wrestling. I started in 8th grade, but both my brother-in-laws, one of them, his name is Travis King, who's a national champion wrestler at South Dakota State. They kind of shamed me into it, for lack of a better term, because they were coaching at the middle school. And I played basketball, and, I never did wrestling. And a lot of the kids start when they're 5 years old. And I was like, I'll start in 8th grade. It was rough that first year, but I figured it out. And it also helped, spent a lot of time just getting beat up on the living room floor by these national champion caliber wrestlers, and figured it out. But so that's how I got into wrestling. And then my senior year, I also participated in track and field, which I honestly did that just for funsies. I thought I was pretty fast, but I didn't really know. I was decently fast. I've lost a step in the last 18 or 14 years or whatever it is. But so I did that. But yeah, football was always the focus, the funnest sport, if you will. So yeah, just kind of a natural progression. It's kind of interesting now where kids are, social media wasn't a thing. I still remember when Facebook showed up at South Dakota State when I was a sophomore, and you had to have a .edu address and all that stuff. But yeah, that wasn't a thing. So recruiting, I had no idea how it worked. I just figured where do you sign up? I want to play football, kind of thing. So I knew I wanted to keep playing football because it was fun. I didn't have aspirations of going to the NFL or anything like that. It was purely this is fun. I'll do that. And then I started looking into it. It turns out it's a lot more than just signing up, and I was behind the curve a little bit. And I missed my entire junior year of football because I got mono on literally the first day of camp my junior year. So I missed the whole year. Then ended up playing. And
Wait, you missed your whole junior season of ball?
The entire season, yeah.
Man, that's a hell of a case of mono.
I know, right? It was kind of funny.
Were you just going around town making out with everyone, Matt, or what? What's the deal here?
Yeah, well, 10% true. That was definitely it. No. I still don't know where I got it. My family had visited Paris and Belgium because we had a foreign exchange student that had stayed with us. We went over and saw him and then checked out Paris. And I think I got it there, just in some of the metro stations were kind of gross, but there's no good story. I just they was like, man, I don't feel too good. And they took me to the hospital or the doctor. I'm like, well, you got mono. And I was like, what the hell? What? So I have no good story. I just got it somehow. But yeah, it was 3 months or something for the inflamed spleen or whatever. So yeah, I missed the whole season, which was not fun. I came back in time for wrestling, and it didn't affect me at all there. But yeah, so my senior year played, and then I knew, kind of jumping forward a little bit, getting to college, that SDSU was going Division I. And it's so stupid as a high schooler, and I'm not trying to talk down to anybody, that you think, Division I is, I got to do the D1 thing, blah, blah, blah. D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO, whatever. It's a lot of work. A lot of respect goes to anybody that does it the right way and puts in that work, earns their spot on the field, and, plays and does, it's, if you get the chance to do it, anybody listening, doesn't matter the level. It's a great way to get an education. It's a great way to develop as a person. but you know, whatever, pursue it. So I knew they were going to Division I, decided to literally send an email to Coach Meadows at the time, because he was the South Dakota recruiter. He's the man. Sent him an actual tape that we made from a VCR where we recorded some cut-ups from stuff and sent it out to him. He gave me a call, and yeah, it's kind of funny. I just fell fat, dumb, and happy into college football, and then showed up on the first day and was like, oh, wow, this is real. Like seeing the seniors, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I signed up for it. I guess I got to put on 40 pounds and somehow get faster, and you know, here we go. But
that's a great point there too, Matt. So like you show up and you have seniors. Who are some of the seniors that stuck out that really set an example and kind of created the expectation of this is the standard that we're going to adhere to here?
Oh, dude, he was before your time, but you probably heard of him. He was a guy named Joe Abel.
Oh yeah.
Oh man. So I mean, he's
a heavyweight boxer.
Oh yeah.
The
so
professional boxer.
Yeah, that's the guy. So I showed up as a tight end, and I'm like, this is the first dude I meet. He was super nice. That made an impression on me, because I fully expected to just get treated like crap as a new guy. I didn't really get much of that. There was a little bit of, you know, whatever, but nothing bad at all. But Joey was just an awesome dude. And I love telling this story. We did our conditioning test on the first day, and I'm running next to Joe, and he takes his shirt off and looks like Hercules. And I'm like coming off of a track season, and I'm in good shape, and I'm like pushing it as hard as I can, and I can like barely keep up with this guy. And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. But no, he was an awesome guy. In the tight end room, I remember Greg Pites we played the same position at W position. Paul Kaiser was a tight end at the time, which is kind of funny. His progression, he went from tight end to being, you know, a monster interior lineman. But Paul was awesome. Chris Wagner, I know you talked about him with Brock Campbell. Shout out to Brock Campbell. I sent him a message. I love Brock. Brock's a great guy.
Love Brock.
Yeah. But,
man, you're name dropping some Rabbit legends here now.
Talk about riding on coattails. I was just happy to be in the room. But Dan Dykehouse was he's a year older than me. Good guy. We just had a lot of good guys. I can't really even remember one guy that just like antagonized me. And then just getting out of my little bubble in Rapid City, South Dakota, Mike James and James Epps, I don't know if you remember those guys. They were linebackers and safeties respectively, but they were JUCO guys from Kansas City, and they were really cool too. We couldn't have been much more different with our backgrounds and our just life stories, but they were cool, and we had a lot of good guys that were older that mentored and brought us along the way. Anthony Watson, if he's out there, shout out to Watson. He's an awesome guy too.
Yep.
And of course, you know, the tight end room was an interesting room because we would spend time with the O linemen, with the running backs, and with the receivers. So we kind of got to. That's the guy. Yeah, that's what I'm running.
Everybody watching. This is Joey Abel.
That's what I'm freaking running next to as an 18-year-old. Like, oh, sweet, this is fun. All right, good times.
245-pound freak. His name is Minnesota Ice, and he ices people. So if anybody is curious about Jackrabbit history, there's what is it, an effort award, Matt, that Coach Stig gives out every year, because I think he set the standard to where he literally wouldn't talk to people at practice. Really, he would just be on a knee, literally, or going through mental reps every single rep he was out, if he was even out. Is there some truth to that?
There's definitely some truth to that, and guys like I remember Marty Crayons, you know, rest in peace, but people like that would. As a scout, because I was a scout my redshirt year and trying to give those guys good looks, if they didn't get a good look, or especially if they didn't get good effort out of a scout, they would demand to see it again. And you know, the standard is the standard, and if you're 1% below it, you're not at it. You need to be above it, and they would definitely let you know. So the coaches, but you know, for sure, those guys definitely taught me a lot about being a collegiate athlete.
Yeah, you know, and I can speak to that too. From my era, it was a graduating guy with yourself, Kubish. I mean, Kubish is a little bit of a living legend there as well, just in terms of his demeanor and how he conducted himself in practice. whether he was partying allegedly or not, carried himself very consistently. I remember one time I was being a little jerk because I thought a scout team member was coming down, like he was playing in the Super Bowl. And, it was like week 12 in 2007 or whatever. And I'm like, Kubish is like, they're not here to serve you. We're here to get better. And I was like, damn, you're right. So I got my head out of my ass and we recouped, man. And that's why I asked that question anyway. So that's cool to know that there were senior leaders setting the stage. And really that was one of the experiences when I got there, as a transfer, we kind of were talking about that, how, man, there were some ballers. Like you already listed Chris Wagner, who's like 6'7", Brock Campbell, who dual sport athlete. So was Wags. I mean, Glenn Fox was athletic in all kinds of ways. He could play. I mean, I remember us not being able to find a spot for Isaiah Jackson because he was so athletic. They're like, do we play him at safety, at linebacker, as a 3-4 D end? What do we, And so it was a great problem to have. And like, just seeing the level and caliber of athlete, regardless of, D2, transitional D1, farm kids, Big Mitch Erickson, like just all types of guys down to, guys who I played with for several years, like Conrad Kerstad, who wouldn't say more than 2 freaking words, but could house any ball that was in a 5-yard range of him in terms of his radius. So, I mean, it was just wild. And then Tony Thompson, freak.
Oh, yeah. So funny story about Tony, and shout out to Conrad, another West River guy. But Tony had wrestled a couple of years. I think he was 2 years younger than me. So I knew him from wrestling. And it's funny because I was one weight above him. And one of my best friends growing up always had to wrestle Tony. And he was able to beat him. But then, so I kind of knew Tony and would follow him. And, God, he just annihilated people wrestling. I mean, it was like, you talk about men against boys out there. And then he showed up at SDSU, and I was like, hey, cool. We kind of knew each other a little bit, and I just wanted to say hi to him. Freshmen, they're doing, strength testing. And Tony got on there. I don't remember what it was, but it was like an obscene amount of weight that he was bench pressing. As a freshman, I was like, holy crap. Okay, that guy wasn't lying when he was talking about wrestling. This guy was like wrestling a Coke machine. He's just a freaking beast. But,
Like Batten and I remember thinking we were pretty strong going in. We were doing like 345 in the bench, 355, something like that. Tony Thompson comes in and does like 395. Like, we're like, holy shit. Like, can this guy, where's his ceiling? Is he there already? And then he ended up doing something obscene. Like, I want to say he did 425 in the bench before it was all said and done. The joke was kind of like he never squatted in high school because his bench was like so far higher than his squat, but I still think he did like 475 in squat and then like 330 in cleans, just something obscene. Just built, just an athlete. And he was a wrestler as well. Like you said, he's great athletes. And I think that speak to that is the fact that you can't really have like a spring ball football season at the prep level. And guys are forced into other sports maybe, or due to farming and the harvest. I know that was a big thing out in Minnesota, which is why guys had to participate in track and field or baseball. Is that, talk about that contributing to your athletic ability or your, career overall?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm obviously a little biased towards wrestlers. Justin Kubish was, he's a big wrestler as well. And one thing you would definitely see out of wrestlers compared to, basketball players, and I'm not trying to start a wrestling basketball thing at all.
Sure.
But, yeah, right. But wrestlers are just tough. They're just friggin' tough. I don't care if you were a state champ or if you were an also ran on the JV. If you stuck with it, you are tough. Kubish, I don't even know if people know this. They probably do, but if memory serves, I took a lot of hits in the head over the years, so bear with me. But I'm pretty sure he tore his ACL his senior year and just played the whole year on a torn ACL.
Yeah.
Like, who does that,
He does.
And that's exactly. It didn't even like slow him down. And the guy was a good athlete regardless. But, I mean, there's a lot of people that happens to, and they're like, all right, it's over. He's like, oh, well, this is what it is. I'm just going to play with a torn leg. I'm going to play on one leg and not miss a beat, So wrestling is hard. It's just hard.
Right.
And there's always somebody out there that's better than you. Like, I would remember there was several guys. I was a pretty successful high school wrestler, but we'd go to these bigger tournaments and there'd be some guy from Minnesota or wherever, and you would just get your butt kicked. And you're like, man, you're feeling pretty good. And then you go, there's always somebody better. So there's always some motivation. And the other thing that's nice about wrestling specifically is your preparation and your work and your willingness to do the extra thing or do it right. You can't hide it. I can't pass Kyle the ball and be like, oh, well, he missed the shot. That's his fault. It's like, no, I got taken down a bunch because my conditioning sucked. Like that had nothing to do with anyone else. That's all on me. So
maximum accountability in that sport. You know?
Oh yeah. And it's just a great life thing where you learn, put in the work, you get the reward, hopefully. But the basketball players usually a little more athletic than us wrestlers. I hate to admit it, but no, for sure. And I'm such an old man father now where I got to give advice all the time. But any young recruits, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but don't feel you need to specialize. Don't just play football. Don't just do one thing. You brought up a really interesting point. I think it was in the Brock Campbell one where the SEC guys, their body age was like 60 and their physical age was like 30 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many situations you'll find yourself in athletics, football or otherwise, that having a nice broad foundation of different athletic movements that you get from different sports will serve you very well instead of just learning how to run block or whatever, backpedal, whatever it may be. So having that varied background is super duper helpful. But
real quick, Matt, to that point, we should highlight our teammate and your graduating class member as well, Paul Onenson. I think he does a phenomenal job really shaping athletes out in Colorado. Also, he's in Greeley, I believe, right?
I think so.
He has Simple Speed Coach, and his whole mantra is to create athletes not that can play on the court, the field, or the arena, not weight room warriors, And I think that that's really pivotal because if you can't master the movement, you can't master the movement while loaded up with some weight, right? And then just to your point, if you specialize too early, all these compounding movements that are the same over and over and over, well, they have an accrued effect, and they're gonna come to claim, your body over time. So you see it all too often, and that's why get outside. If you're a quarterback or a throwing athlete, throw the football, throw the baseball, throw the discus, do a different type of arm action movement, or just different movements in general. Different movement demands are going to make you more resilient. Like you were speaking to wrestlers being more resilient than basketball players. I think that's what you said. Did you say basketball players are soft? Is that what you were saying?
If you want to run it through the Jackrabbit Illustrated translator, that may be what came out. That wasn't what I exactly said, but I guess you're picking up what I was putting down. No, I'm just kidding. Not totally kidding there, but no, for sure. And Paul Onenson, he needs to charge people a little extra for mental strength coaching. I have never met a braver individual, and I've seen some pretty brave people. That dude's nuts. He's either got some brain wires that are crossed, or he is just insanely brave, but unbelievable.
Do you remember the Georgia Southern game?
I remember about 20 different instances where I was like, well, Paul's dead. And then he appears and goes and returns the ball for a touchdown or whatever. But
I think he spoiled us because I watch some high level punt returners like Jackson Yankee, who, man, he housed some in his career. But I watch these guys struggle to just make rudimentary punting catches. And I'm like, wait, did Paul just make this look so damn easy? Oh, and Cole Brody too. I don't think he ever dropped the ball or let one drop. So we went from Paul to Cole to, I can't even remember who came. Maybe Jerian Butler was pretty good too. But other than that.
That's a tough group to follow. As a guy that caught one kickoff in my career, I can't exactly speak as an expert, but Paul was just, I don't even put words to it. It was exciting. You did not want to be on the bench when you were when he was catching a punt. You definitely wanted to watch that.
Yeah, man. And I brought it up on the podcast. We did a former player feature with him, but he was a national champion in tumbling. I don't know if many people know that. So that dude has the smoothest running angles, movement angles,
Yeah.
and he attributes a lot of that to tumbling, knowing how to orient his body in space. And we take for granted a lot of times that guys getting up to this D1 level or college football in general have these movement capacity to be able to get in positions that they really haven't owned yet, right? Like I remember, like Coach Meadows, for instance, tight ends had to go in practice and do some install with the O-line, but also some technique work when we're doing eats and TEDs and stuff, double team blocking schemes for those who are just listening. But as we're learning, how to adopt and adapt to these different movement capacities, demeanor is one of them. So you need to even just be able to set your demeanor, which a lot of, high school coaches, I'm sure, do as well, but are they as disciplined at the collegiate level or at the high school level as collegiate?
Yeah.
No. So it's a completely different demand. And what was that like, Matt? So you're going from high school. Did you play tight end? I bet you were one of the better athletes. You played all over the field, maybe?
Yeah, I played tight end, but I did. I played both ways. But yeah, my high school was actually kind of an anomaly because I was at the time 6'2", 6'2". How tall am I? 6'2", 205. And our O-line averaged like 270 and like 6'4". We just had a senior class that was just huge. So it actually looked like a normal quote unquote line, unlike you get, like I remember Colin Koshard or some of those other guys that would show up, and you got like normal looking high school kids, and then you got this 6'5" stud at the tight end. It just looked kind of goofy, but our line looked kind of normal, if you will. But I was a tight end and a defensive end and some other stuff. But so showing up, it was definitely it was an adjustment, to say the least. I still remember, like vividly, the first time they put the threes in for one play in fall camp, and I swear that everything was in like fast forward, and that my feet were stuck in concrete, and I was like, "What is happening?" And you adjust to it, but holy crap, that was.
What do you think that is, Matt? Because I felt the same thing when your first couple plays, like, I don't know if it's your brain is moving so fast too to try to process it. I mean, literally the speed is very different, but it's kind of like that overwhelm sets in at first, and then you kind of settle in because of the exposure to it. And obviously the best part about slowing the game down is knowing what your responsibility is to the core, right? Yeah. And then also being able to diagnose what the defense is in, because it slows everything down. So how long did that take you? I mean, you're a smart guy, a real smart guy. Did you go to school for engineering?
No, I actually got my degree in aviation education. So,
so a little easier.
Yeah, it was super unique collegiate experience, and I'll get to it in a second. But it's exposure and it's knowledge. I talk about it all the time, and now and when I'm instructing guys and whatever. But if you have a really solid foundation of knowledge, translation, you know what you're doing out there, you can be fast. If you have to take that extra beat to, what does this mean, or what do I do? You're gone. Forget it. You're just done.
Exactly.
And you have to know what you're doing, and then it's exposure, but experience will only get you so far. If you don't, I always tell this to my kids, and they probably hate it, and I'm sure they're rolling their eyes if they hear it, but practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So you gotta do it the right way, and you gotta know what you're doing. But yeah, it took a while, but you get there, you get exposed to it, you get caught up, and you got to learn what to do. If I doubt they remember this, but some of the older tight ends I remember, or I mentioned earlier, Shannon Moore had me go up. Shannon Moore's the man, by the way.
Yep.
Wanted me to diagram a play, and it was like 24 roll, which was like the easiest play. I don't think I had one line go in the right direction. Like everything was wrong. I don't know. He probably thought I was messing with him. It was so bad. So that was the kind of a wake up call too, of like, I need to learn what the hell I'm doing. I can't just show up and be like, I'm the new guy, whatever, who cares? I'll just go where they tell me. Like, I had to figure it out. And once you figure it out, then the game slows down, and then you know where you're going, and then you can, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's some adapt quicker to it than others. Others can rely on their athleticism and maybe make up those little gaps. But I don't care if you're Deion Sanders, if you're just completely clueless, you're going to get just embarrassed out there. You got to know what you're doing. So
yeah, it's high level problem solving with dire consequences in real time, right? I mean, it's a chess game constantly. And I think, That's a great point that you bring up Coach Moore. Shout out to Coach Moore, who's now the tight ends coach at Wyoming. If you're not going to play tight end at South Dakota State, that's a good second option. And I did say second option because it would be. This is tight end in FCS, man.
No kidding.
Chris Wagner, Dallas Goddard, Colin Koshart, now we got Tucker Kraft, who's surely going to land on an NFL squad. Exactly. But yeah, so like, I think Coach Moore allowing you to teach the scheme is going to just show more mastery of it over time, right? And like you said, perfect practice makes perfect. And it was funny. I was watching a tight end U clip. For those of you who don't know, there's this big tight end symposium put on by George Kittle and Travis Kelce and among other greats, Greg Olson, out in Nashville, and Dallas Goddard is at it. And I was watching some clips on social media, and I was like, man, the way Travis Kelce is breaking down the fundamentals of this cut is exactly like Coach Moore used to break it down. It's pretty funny, but yeah, it's adapting not only to the speed of the game, but the mental demands placed in the game. And like, I don't know, you mentioned his name before. I don't know if there's an offensive coordinator who had as much faith in us as offensive players, specifically tight ends and fullbacks, to load us up, because we're motioning and the plays changing based on where our alignment is, based on the defense we're seeing. And they put a lot on us, man. So you better get your head in the playbook. Back in the day, I don't know if it's changed much now. I mean, they're the offensive stuff that they do. I mean, we saw them in Colorado. They just lit up Colorado State.
Oh yeah, that was beautiful.
With a lot of different looks too. So I'm sure the playbook is full there. But man, talk about the experience. It was cool for me. It was cool, and it was mixed emotions for me because I tore my pectoral the Great West Championship year, and when we were text exchanging, all I saw was complete like a warped reality when I tore it. And it was funny that you were spotting me. So it's basically your friggin' fault, Matt.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it funny when it happened. It's a 30-second story. That was the best I ever did on bench. It was me, you, Eric Schroeder, and Mitch Pontrelli. I don't know how I got paired up with you guys. I did 365, and I was pretty stoked about that. I was happy with that. And then Ponch and Schroeder, who were in my class coming in, they were all, good job. They got on, just boom, made it look like nothing. Like, could you at least make it look a little difficult? Well, then they went off to give you water or whatever, and you got on and came to, and like the weight you're pushing up, they just tore. And it basically turned into like a 300 and whatever amount of weight curl for me, and you're not helping. I don't expect you to help, but you know what I mean? And I'm like,
you're like, damn, crap. Kyle, you're not helping.
I'm like, come on, help me out, dude. I'm like, well, Kyle's dead. I can't move this. Become someone helps me. I mean, I literally was like, Mitch, help. And him and Eric came and helped me lift it, because I mean, it just dropped, as I'm sure you remember. And as
I remember that.
Scary. I was glad to know you came back. But,
no, it was one of those. It was just a freak thing, like lack of sleep. We probably shouldn't have been doing. Well, it's a matter of principle and philosophy. I don't think we should have maybe maxed out on 4 major lifts in one day starting at 6 a.m. But you live and learn, and the profession evolves in strength and conditioning. And I did learn a ton from Coach Mo and like the entire support staff. Willie Jones, I mean, he's at Minnesota now. He knows his stuff. I think we got Jacobs coming in. He was a former GA at South Dakota State, and he's made the rounds across the country. So I think he's going to do some good things as the new head strength coach for football. Man, it was one of those. I forget why we were talking about that, but it was a wild ride. And so you were putting on weight, becoming a tight end, learning the schemes. Playbook was deep. But I wanted to talk about 2007. It was a mixed bag of emotions for me, because I'm sitting there, watch all the hard work that you guys put yourself through, the Kubishes, the Koenigs, the Wagners, the Onensons, even Ryan Berry, because he sat behind Carduce in 06, and I think he battled some injuries as well. And you got, Jerron Harris, Micah Johnson played the previous year in 06, just was on the precipice of almost winning a title, and then across the offensive line, obviously you had, all the heavy hitters, so Mitch Erickson, and you had Tyler Cooks, and
Yeah.
Shoot, man, just like a bevy of guys who really paid their dues. Chris Johnson, a young and up and coming linebacker, and again, just stellar defensive contributors. And so you see that game and the pivotal run on 4th down, where you did your job, Wags did his job, everybody on the offensive line was just manning up, getting the job done and moving bodies against the furry homeless cows. And Koenig trucks the DB filling and then just houses it. What was that experience like, man? That's like one of the most pivotal plays in Jackrabbit history that secured, that whole game was amazing. You talked about Eric Schroeder and or maybe it was Pontrelli. One of them blocked a field goal. Cole Brody blocked a punt. Paul Onenson housed the punt for 97 yards.
It's one of the best punt returns I've ever seen. Like, unreal play. But yeah, sorry to cut you off, but that game was obviously amazing. And that particular play, they knew what we were going to run. We've been running that exact play all year. And who I was supposed to block was that DB that Koenig had to run over. There was a guy named Matt Anderson on the NDSU team. If he went over there, came through, there's no one to block him. So I blocked him. And it was one-on-one Corey with a 180-pound DB. I'll take that all day.
Yeah, no, that was smart. Just like to add to that, just like Coach Moore always said, near threat. I mean, obviously that applies to blitz pickup, but you're going to take the near threat to the ball carrier as well. Mm-hmm. And like you said, favorable matchup for Corey.
Oh yeah. So, but that game was just a great game. They had some really good players. I remember one guy named Joe Mays.
Oh yeah,
he played in the league. Real good player. Played against him for years. Spent a lot of time blocking him and the other linebackers. But that was just a good game. It was an awesome game. The guys played well. The play to me that sticks out beyond the Corey play, their running back, and I think he's their offensive coordinator now, Tyler Roll.
Yep.
He was just running over everybody all year. I mean, he was doing amazing. The defense stepped up big time, and our current defensive coordinator in the era of CTE and everything, I probably shouldn't highlight this, but I'm pretty sure, I know Jimmy hit him, forced the fumble. It was a huge play. I'm pretty sure he knocked him out.
Knocked Tyler out.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I remember that. Yeah. He didn't come back in.
Yeah.
He did not come back in. Listen, Jimmy was notorious for that. Number one, you can never get lower than him. So I hated blocking him.
I had to block him about 500 times.
You're 6'2", very smooth, good blocker, and I'm 6'3", so I got to get even lower, just a hair lower than you have to get.
Right.
And I could never do it. So that son of a gun.
He's awesome too, great guy. But yeah, he put the hit on him, and I'm not advocating that at all. I don't want people to get hurt.
Yeah.
Hell of a hit, forced the fumble, great play. Huge play, turning point play, because they were driving to score, and then we'd go win that game if they score there. So,
dude, those two guys are the epitome of Dakota football in both Dakotas. I mean, Tyler Roll, you can't do anything but respect how he played the game if you look back at it.
100%.
And then if you look at Jimmy, I mean, just a sheer defier of all odds. Oh, and he would. Oh man, just the intensity. I feel like we're warming up to get ready to play again.
I know, I'm getting fired up. I go out there and pull a hamstring and get killed in the first hit.
You see his his iris shrink to the level of pins, needles. You're like, all right, Jimmy's turn. He's flipped the switch.
Jimmy's good. I'm going over here, so I'm getting caught up.
Yeah. I gotta stay. When I switched to offense, I'm like, shit, I gotta stay calm. I can't be burning my fuse too quick. Right. But no, man. So speaking of fuses and engines and fires and stuff like that, you mentioned you're a pilot in the United States Air Force. So, that's a hell of an experience. So and this is kind of a cute little backstory, if you will. But the reason that I got switched to offense, aside from being lightly recruited in college as an H-back tight end, was because you forewent your 5th year, correct, and entered the Air Force.
Yeah, I got selected to go to officer training school and pilot training. So I graduated in 4 years. I've redshirted my first year, so I had another year, but I applied and got picked up to go be a pilot, which, you know, luck and timing rules all, and they picked me up. I had planned to apply, you know, until I aged out in my mid-30s, but I got picked up the first to try, so that was good. And yeah, I mean, there was some definite guilt associated with that. And then I looked at the room and I'm like, nah, they'll be all right.
Yeah,
They don't
no,
need me.
again, I appreciate it. You changed my future, really, because I mean, I looked at the room after transferring and being this highly touted recruit, played right away, but, you know, battling injuries and keeping on weight is a different beast. And I'm looking at freaking Eric Schroeder, you know, Mitch Pontrelli, you know, Nobling, who battled some injuries,
Yeah.
but he was like 6'6", 240. You got Danny Batten. I think everyone knows his story. Tony Thompson. I mean, they were fine defensively,
Yeah.
you know, and Brian Fisher, Brian Fisher could move. You talk about wrestling. Brian Fisher can move 330-pound bodies at 230 pounds. So I don't think he ever played above 240. So it's like, I was like, defense is fine. Yep. I think I'm going to try my shot here, lose some weight, you know, look better with my shirt off at the pool, hopefully. Yeah. So no, it's weird how histories intersect and things like that. And, you know, so thank you for that. And then also, you know, what was that like entering officer candidate school? You went off on a high note. It was like Jordan. You went off like Michael Jordan. You win the first D1 title ever in your home state at the best university in the state. Beating your in-state or beating your intra-conference rival who was number one in the nation. Dude, you can't write a better story than that.
Yeah, it worked out pretty good. But yeah, going to the Air Force, getting prepared for the physical aspect of it. And, you know, it's the military. It's not the Marine Corps, the SEALs. I wasn't going to BUDS or something, but there is a physical aspect to the training, and started doing more longer runs and more calisthenics, and not, you know, no need to bench 365 in the Air Force anymore. So I knew it was going to be a bit of a challenge when, like, last game, cool, high five, we won the conference, good job. All right, I need to start getting ready for this. I went back to my wrestling days, and I used to run, you know, 5 miles like it was nothing. And I'm like, I'll do 3. I ran like half a mile and was like, okay, this sucks. I gotta redo the physiology a little bit here. And he got to it, you know, and do a lot more long runs now and stuff like that. But right away, we did sprints, short bursts with quick recoveries. Didn't really have a long fuse. It was a quick boom, and you just recover a lot. So I recovered really quick from my half mile, you know, embarrassing run, but it took a little while to rewire the stuff that got there. And then in August or in late July, I went down to Montgomery, Alabama, Maxwell Air Force Base. It's a 3-month training down there. Did that, came out as a second lieutenant, which is the lowest commissioned officer rank, and then was going to Shepherd Air Force Base for pilot training. That's a unique base in the Air Force because it houses it's a program called the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training. They call it NJET, but what's unique about it is it's all the NATO countries. So there's a big German, Italian, Dutch, Norwegian. There's a couple Turks and Canadians. We didn't have any Brits at the time, but there's a lot of Brits there now. So when I was learning to fly, I got instructed by a lot of the aforementioned countries, and my class was half Americans and half Norwegians, which was pretty cool. Just a unique experience, a bunch of young 20-somethings meeting up in North Texas, in Wichita Falls, Texas, to like learn to fly jets, and it was fun. It was very, very fun. Football and collegiate sports helped a lot, mainly because I'm going all the way back to when Shannon Moore made me draw the play up and I looked like an idiot. Learning to fly airplanes, there's a lot more than just like, all right, well, where's the on switch? Let's do it. You know, there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of things you need to know before you get there. And then there's also the physical act of flying the airplane. So I did have some experience from South Dakota State. I graduated as a civilian flight instructor. So while I was playing football, I was flying Cessnas and stuff at the same time, and ended up being an instructor working for the school and playing football at the school, which is kind of cool. And then, yeah, so that helped me a lot, but it's a different animal. Going from a Cessna to the first airplane you fly is called a T6 Texan 2. which that's a big step up. And like I talked about on that first play where everything was in like fast forward, it was the same thing in that airplane, which is funny now because after a while it's like, man, this thing is slow, but when you're just learning, I thought we were going like Mach 3, everything was so fast and I just couldn't hang in there, but you figure it out and you get going. And then went and flew an airplane called a T-38, which is the Air Force's advanced trainer for guys that go into the fighter and bomber world. So did that, got about 100 hours in each airplane, I think. Don't quote me on that, but it's about that. T-38's been around since the mid-'60s, which is kind of crazy. It's still around. If there's anyone from the government out there, like, get the replacement for the love of God. But great airplane, super fun. Learned a lot about flying jets, and then graduated. Right before you graduate, you get your follow-on assignment, and I got assigned to the F-15C model, which is a single-seat fighter, purely air-to-air. Yeah, I don't know if you pull a picture of that, but a lot of people know airplane's been around forever. They're starting to finally retire them, replace them with something. I'm not exactly sure what. The Air Force has a bunch of different plans, but those jets are getting replaced, and that was a pretty unique experience. Did that for a while, and then went in an unexpected direction. Got assigned to an airplane called the U-28 in the Air Force Special Operations Command, and that is where the bulk of my flying has done. Bulk of my career was spent. Did a lot of flying in that. Got about 4,000 hours in that airplane now total. Deployments, all that stuff. Did a couple of operational tours. I should have mentioned. So pilot training was in North Texas. Then I went and flew the F-15 in Oregon. And then I went and flew the U-28 in Hurlburt Field, which is in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, which is in the Panhandle, about an hour east of Pensacola, if anyone knows where that is. But real nice place. 6 years operational. Then I taught at the Air Force Weapons School, which is the closest thing in the Air Force to the Navy's fighter weapons school, the Top Gun. Since you brought that up, I'm going to get all kinds of shit from people if they know me comparing to, hey, there you go. But that's me in a T-38.
So this is the T-38 you were talking about?
Yeah. And that
Nice.
was, I wish I remember what that was. But yeah, going out to fly a T-38 mission. So
now, were you deployed during any conflict or anything like that, or any support?
Yeah. So I did deployments I did one to East Africa. I did a couple to Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan, which is about, 20 miles, I think, north of Kabul, the capital city.
Wow, that was an extremely important strategic landmark, wasn't it?
It ended up being, and I'm not going
to we won't politicize
make too many comments on all that, but we'll have a few beers and I'll tell you what you want when you turn the podcast off.
There we go.
I did one to Kandahar, which is in southern part of Afghanistan as well. And then I did, right when the whole ISIS thing kicked off, then we were still going all over the place, but I went to Iraq, 3 different locations in Iraq doing counter ISIS stuff, which was pretty interesting to say the least. So yeah, definitely spent a lot of time overseas. I looked it up because I had a feeling you'd ask. I didn't know this number, so if anyone thinks I'm a massive tool, I did not know this. I had to look it up. Ended up with 361 combat missions and where's that piece of paper? 1,760 some odd combat hours.
Are you
something
kidding
like that?
me?
There's a lot. So
you got to say that again. You got to say that again, man. Because I think it's easy for us who are removed to see Top Gun and to see the Hollywood glamour of it, and you can still recognize the physical demands of the G-force but 360 plus combat missions.
Yeah, and so with the community that I came from, that I'm still a part of, but I'm definitely an old has-been now, running tests and all that, but that's probably on the upper end, but it's definitely not the most. I know guys that have over 500, and I talked about 7 deployments there. They've got 13, just crazy.
What
And
constitutes a combat mission? Like, that's not necessarily always aerial combat, right? Like, it could be reconnaissance or something.
well, those are flights. Those are missions that we flew in a combat theater.
Oh,
So, yeah, there's no like, well, this was a big shooting fight or this
right.
was not much going on,
But I think
those
for the
are missions. Yeah.
layperson, yeah, for like the layperson like me, I think most people hear combat and they don't. They probably assume maybe is that aerial combat, or is that like where
Yeah.
you're actually engaging the enemy? No, probably, right?
Well, the interesting part, so the F-15, like I said, is purely an air-to-air fighter. Well, since 9/11, with very brief exceptions, but definitely in Afghanistan and Iraq, there was no air-to-air threat. We just completely dominated that battle space, and we had no threat in that environment. So that was kind of unique compared to what you would think in a traditional war like Vietnam, where they've got, MiGs and, enemy airplanes and surface air missiles and all that stuff. There was a surface air missile threat and all that, but it was not nearly as robust because we owned the whole country. So what our focus of our mission was, especially within special operations, which is where I'd worked the majority of my career, was, finding bad guys, and not just regular Joe Blow, but trying to find like bad guy leadership and working with the whole team, the joint team, joint meaning Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and, lots of people to try to find these guys and find high value targets, doing that kind of a thing. So
What's
there's a
that
lot
like?
of that.
I got to ask you about the mindset about that. Maybe you don't let your mind go to that place like holy hell, this guy is, on an extremely renowned terrorist. He runs this entire cell. We're setting forth on a mission to take him out. Like, what is that like? How do you transfer the mindset of running 24 roll to getting aerial, being competent enough to fly a plane, to lead a team, to do spec ops like that, dude? Like, what's that like?
No, it's interesting for sure. And it's a totally an individual thing. For me, I always tried to have a very clear line of, this is my job. This is my mission. I'm doing this. To me, this isn't, this individual who has a wife and kids who also happens to be the leader of ISIS. Like, I'm not interested in that. This is who I'm going after. So I'm going to go after him. Other people have a little bit of a harder time separating the human element out of that. And it's different. And I'm not even going to pretend that it's the same. If you're a guy on the ground and you're clearing a house and you have to, take care of an individual in a hand-to-hand manner or close up, that's totally different. It's just different. That's a lot harder to pretend that, oh, yeah, that's something on a screen. That's a different animal.
Because you're a bit more removed in your capacity, right? At least aerially.
Yeah. One thing that is interesting, though, in the special operations type of thing is you develop what's known as a pattern of life on somebody. So, like, if you looked at, like, if I had some bad guy special operations unit trying to develop my pattern of life, they'd see that I get up about the same time every day. I always park in the same spot in the driveway. I take the same way to work. It takes this long to get there. And I go to work from this to that, and I go to lunch. And, like, everyone is very consistent, to include like bad guy leaders. It's very easy to develop their pattern of life and figure out when would be a good time to do something to them. Or why does he keep going to this building? Well, maybe we should take a look in that building. Like, oh, what do we got here? And then it all kind of builds out from there. So that's part of it too. One thing, I talk about that number of combat missions. I don't have a number, but it's a large portion of them is not, high action, high octane, anything going on. It's more consistently building and developing and all of that. It's a long game. It's patience, and it's literally 24-hour operations where I'm up there for my 4-hour chunk, and then I replace the guy that was up there previous. They hand that whatever they saw off to us. We continue, then we hand it off to the next guy, and repeat for however long it takes. Which, in an urban environment in Mosul, in northern Iraq, city of 1 million people, like, that's not easy. And you do that for a month straight, and you never lose a guy. Like, that's tough. But that doesn't make an exciting movie in Top Gun. I'll tell you
Right.
that.
Right.
But it's it is what it is. And
now, were you? I'll ask you this. I won't get into like the specifics. Obviously, that can evoke a lot of things. But were you chased ever, or did you engage in chase? And you don't.
oh man, so there's threats for sure. The only time I was ever messed with in the air was, believe it or not, when the Russians came out to Syria in like 2018. We would be working up along the river, once again, like the West River, East River thing. We were East River and the Russians were West River, and wouldn't you know it, like everybody's like on the river. So everybody's wanting to be like right there. And there were several times when, Russians would show up and we'd have to kind of get out of their way and let them do their thing. And then they'd get out of our way. And that got interesting, to say the least, because it's not like I could just call the guy on the radio and be like, hey, comrade, go over there. It takes a little longer than that. And it's very deliberate. And you don't want to be the guy that screws that up either, because that goes up the chain pretty fast to the, secretaries of defense, and they're yelling at each other or whatever. And so that got interesting. But yeah, to kind of get to I think what you're really asking, like the exciting stuff in the F-15, you do that sort of stuff all the time. Like the training that you would see, that's like a daily thing, or whenever you fly, that's what you're doing. So
what does it feel like carrying that many G's or pushing that many G's? Like, I mean, what's the high, what do you get up to, like 5 or 6, 4 or 5?
No, 9. 9 is about what the human body can take.
So is that was real then?
Oh yeah, that was definitely real.
Wow.
And one thing that was interesting in that F-18 that they filmed that in, there's a lot of little details that they got right for the military observer out there.
For those of you who aren't keeping up, it's Top Gun Maverick, the new one. We're referencing some of the stuff in there. No spoilers, just the type of plane.
Yeah. So one thing that's unique about the F-18 compared to the F-15, you'd see the cuts to where anyone, Maverick or whoever is, pushing the throttle up with his left hand, and then he pulls the stick back and the airplane goes up. There was one little scene in there where they talk about, we got to pull 9.5 G's to get out of there. Well, the F-18 is limited to 7.5 G's. So if you plant the stick back, it's going to give you 7.5, unless you hit this little paddle switch with your pinky, and then it'll allow you to override it. They showed that in the movie.
That's sick.
I know, that's like a really cool little detail that only nerds like me are going to pick up on. But
it would make you're the expert here. So it would make sense though that if you go higher, you warp the frame of the plane, correct?
Oh yeah. So,
and how much would one of those planes cost? You would know.
Oh geez. So yeah, if you broke an airplane, like literally over-G'd it to the point where it can never fly again, like it's literally written off. You can't fly it. It's unsafe. So yeah, that'd be a Google thing. But if I had to guess, I'd probably say 50 million for an Super Hornet. Maybe 50, maybe more. They ain't cheap. I know that. But the airplanes themselves are incredibly strong. Like the F-15 that I flew, I know a guy, the stick in that airplane is different, where if I'm going 600 knots and I just pull the stick back, is just slam it into my lap like they were doing in that movie, it'll pull 14 G's. Like you have to monitor it yourself. But the airframe is so strong. I actually have a good buddy who had what they called a G-lock, a G-induced loss of consciousness, because when you're pulling G's, all the blood is getting pulled down out of your head, and there's a maneuver you kind of can fight that. But he G-locked and was pointed straight at the ground, and he's unconscious. And afterburners are cooking, and he's going straight at the ground. He wakes up and sees just a face full of the earth, and survival instinct kicks in, and he just plants the stick. Airplane comes back, pulled something like 11.7 G's, but they were like rolling G's. So like if you take a metal and you twist it, that's really tough on the airplane. They looked it up, it was like 127% of allowable for the G's. The maintenance personnel and the pilots they're popping panels and making sure the airplane could fly again, but the airplane flew again. Like the things are really well put together, Union steel workers back in St. Louis in the 70s driving rivets, just putting jets together, and they're still flying. So
nothing like American steel, baby.
You know it. But you really do want to keep an eye on that. You want to extend the life of the airframe. You don't need to put G loading on the airplane.
I'll remember that next time I'm in an F-18.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do 7.5 Gs. Just let them just plant the stick and then be like, hey, where's that paddle switch thing? And you'll do it. And all of a sudden, whoa!
How do you even prepare for G's to sustain those forces?
Yeah. So it's getting used to it. First time I pulled like any G's on my very first flight in pilot training, I thought I was, the man, because I'm going to go be a fighter pilot, and check me out. And I puked my freaking guts out. And it sucked. I was like, oh God, I made a mistake. But you get used to it. But a big part of it is physical. You want to have strong legs, specifically abs, butt, hammies, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a specific maneuver. They call it anti-G straining maneuver, where you flex your legs, you flex your butt, you tense your stomach, and then when you're breathing, you don't just breathe like normal. You kind of cut the air off at your glottis, and then kind of do a type thing where you let a little bit out and you let a little bit in every few seconds. What's your glottis? Kind of like right up in here. What you want to prevent is if you just go, and then 7 Gs pushes all your air out. You don't have any air. So you work on that maneuver, and then a lot of the modern fighters now have. I'm blanking on the term, but it helps you pressure breathing. You get above a certain G, it literally just blasts 100% oxygen down your throat, which takes a little getting used to, but it helps a lot. And you also wear a thing called an anti-G suit, and it's just, they call them colloquially speed jeans. You put them on, you zip it up, and it's got a bladder kind of around your abdomen and then along your legs. And then you pull G's and it inflates, and it just helps put more pressure on your legs. And but you do all that, and then you get used to it. Like, exposure to G is huge. You just got to do it, and then you kind of get used to it. But yeah, that first time you pull any kind of G, you're like, holy crap. And then the next thing you know, you're doing basic fighter maneuvers or dogfighting at 8 Gs, looking backwards, and you're just dealing with it. You don't even think about it. But definitely takes some getting used to.
I can only imagine. So you talked about, being from a military family, and we talked a little bit about Top Gun. I'm sure there were some inspirations in your life to pull from outside of Top Gun, but was it the fact that you had kind of that heritage in your family that drove you into this career path?
I think it helped. It definitely helped. My dad was a pilot in the Air Force. He flew tankers, so the KC-135 and the EC-135, another variant, and also helicopter gunships in Vietnam. It's kind of a broad spectrum of flying there. And then, I was always interested in airplanes. Like, there's a video of me as a baby, and some of my first words, he's got a book. He's like, what's this? And I'm like naming the airplanes, which is kind of funny. But watching Top Gun a lot it's kind of toolish, I guess. But when you're 4, you're not too worried about being a tool. Yeah. So I just watched Top Gun a lot, and I remember once again on the VCR they'd have a flying scene, and then I'd fast forward to the next flying scene, and I'd play it, and I'd fast forward to the next flying scene. I'd skip all that story, which wasn't a lot of story in the first one anyway, so I didn't have to fast forward much. But the F-14, it's just a cool airplane. Never got to fly one of those. Never got to fight one. They retired at my junior year of college, I think in 2007. Don't quote me on that, but it was around that time frame. But the F-15 came out right around the same time as the F-14. And then getting to fly that was super cool, super neat. And it's just a great airplane. And the stuff they've got out now, the F-22s, F-35s, starting to get out with 6th generation fighters, they call them. Some really cool stuff out there that it's kind of mind blowing to see where military aviation has gone. It's just nuts, the amount of technology and stuff.
I mean, the pace at which technology is moving just blows my mind with just the artificial intelligence. And I'm sure how the military is already integrating that into flight systems and all types of things. I'm sure we could do like 10 podcasts just on all the intricacies of that stuff, which I think would be cool. We'll have to source our listeners to see what they'd be interested in, but it'd be kind of hard to keep up. We'd probably need a key to reference and stuff like that. But so I got to ask you this, what's your call sign?
So my call sign is Macho. So Matt Macho Anderson. And I'll give you the story on that, the PG one anyway. It stands for Matt Anderson Can't Handle Overtime. So it all came back from, we got back late one night, and it was just one of those sorties where nothing worked, and it was just a chocolate mess, And I wrote down, this is one thing that no one really appreciates or understands, that's a casual observer of military aviation. There's so much that goes into each sortie, from the briefing side and the preparation, the study side. You go do the flight, and then the debrief side is tons of data compilation. You're writing down, at this time I did this time I did that, and it takes time, and then you do the debrief, and then you learn from it. And that's the part they pay you for. You fly for free, you get paid to do all that other stuff. But I had done all that, and it took a while, and I was ready to leave at like 2:30 in the morning, and this guy stopped me, and he's like, "Hey, I actually got this form. You mind putting it all in that form?" And I had a reaction that was, explosive. And everybody else, there's like 20 other guys there, and they're all still there, like, "Okay, fine." And I was like, "Wow." Anyway, so I can't handle overtime. So that's kind of what that was about. But, there's also, I got lucky on that one. There's a lot worse call signs out there, so it could have been much, much worse.
Are you the squadron leader too when you would fly these missions, or when you got on these missions too?
It would depend. So there's, on the mission, you would be flying with a bunch of different aircraft, and then you could be the mission commander. So you'd be in charge of the mission, and you have your left, right bounds, and you do it. Or within each of the big missions, there's smaller, what we call them in the Air Force, flights. The Navy calls them either sections or divisions, depending on 2 or 4 ships, and the Marine Corps does as well. But you can be in control of each one of those individual elements. It's very, chain of command, military style, where the guy at the top makes the big picture decisions, but you can't be the guy in charge of everything. It's impossible.
So no, that would be a great question to ask then. So how like in football, it kind of silos, right? Defense goes and does their thing, offense goes and does their thing, O-line, D-line, skill, so on and so forth down the line. But you have to integrate that and come together to create a cohesive product, right? Working towards a unified goal. That's why I think football is the game of games, because that's what society should do, theoretically writ large. And so now you have your military missions that you're conducting, and you have different outfits, right, contributing. So you may work with the Navy on one, correct? Or is it just So when you're integrating this, how does that go? I mean, I know there's this, kind of offhand conception that the Navy doesn't like the Army doesn't like the Marines, and so on and so forth. But how does that really go when you're conducting business?
Well, honestly, every time I've seen, when it matters, everyone's down for the cause big time. Naturally, everyone's going to give each other a hard time when you're at the bar or whatever. But when it matters, everyone is spot on. It's interesting you bring up the integration thing, because 3 of my years down in Florida, I taught at the Air Force Weapons School. So I was an instructor at the weapons school. And a big part of that is integration. So we get students, and they're the experts in their craft, and then we want to broaden their aperture so that they can, literally integration is like the buzzword at that school, getting it all to come together. So it's challenging. I mean, if you have a mission and you're doing, say, a special operations mission, and you need to go get rid of some bad guy airplanes, well, then you got to bring in Navy or Air Force aircraft to clear that picture, doing what's known as offensive counter air. And then say you have to do some getting rid of enemy surface to air missiles. You have other aircraft that can do what's known as suppression of enemy air defenses. And then if you need to do all this stuff, it starts layering on. And, it's tough. There's a lot of timing. There's a lot of tempo. There's a lot of layering of effects. Non-kinetics would be a big one, like cyber effects is massive. If you don't have to blow something up, if the computer guys can just like turn it off, that's more effective. You don't have to put anyone at risk. Huge thing, especially modern day.
So is that a lot of your work too, Matt? Sorry to interrupt. Just risk mitigation. I mean, clearly, because you have these, multi-million-dollar hunks of metal hurling through the air at, ungodly speeds, and you're just trying to essentially do as little damage as possible while inflicting maximal damage on the enemy without, causing a ruckus. Is that a good way to encapsulate it?
Well, the other thing that weapons school graduates call them patch wearers will always say is it depends. You just say it depends, and that way you're never wrong.
Yeah.
No, it really does depend. So the scope of the mission could be like, we want to, everything from this line over, we want it destroyed. Okay. Or everything from this line over, we don't want touched with the exception of this one thing. So you got to figure out your desired effect and work backwards from that to get there. So
Sounds
it
like
really
football,
does.
baby.
I know, right?
Football
It really
game
does
plan.
depend. It's 100% the same. Well, if you're playing a really explosive offense and you want to run a ball control scheme, well, that's going to affect your offense way different than if you're like, they're going to score 100, we need to score 105. So let's just air it out and let's go for it. So that totally changes everything and how you're going to compose all your stuff. The big thing we deal with is what's known as ALR, acceptable level of risk. And that determines your tactics and what you're going to do and, you know, the risk you're going to take to accomplish the mission. Like if we're not willing to lose any airplanes, then we don't have any risk that we're willing to take. Like if the guy flies directly in front of you and says, shoot me, then like, all right, I'll shoot you. But there's no risk there. If it's an extreme risk, then like, well, we could lose everybody, but if we accomplish the mission, it was worth it. So that's just something you have to balance, and that drives your tactics and your planning. And, you know, that's a big part of it.
Got to ask this now. When did you ever have a moment where, you know, your heart was in your throat and your Galatas had to do all it could to to prevent, you know, hurling or, you know, you name it, because you thought stuff was about to hit the fan? Do you have a moment like that in the air?
Yeah, I've actually had a couple of them. Believe it or not, most of them were maintenance related and not combat related. But flying the U-28 single engine airplane, I took off one time out of a base in northern Iraq to go do ISIS related missions, and I lost all of my avionics. So all of my instruments that, you know, whatever. We have standbys and you're like, oh God, this is fine. And you start troubleshooting and you're dealing with it. Well, then right as I'm dealing with that, then the engine basically was running away, for lack of a better term. It was like, if I can't get this thing under control, I have to shut the engine down, which really sucks because then I have no engine and I have no instruments. And I'm like, well, and oh, by the way, right beneath me is ISIS. So it's like, this sucks. Let's deal with it. But one thing I will say, and I'm not special or unique in any regard with this comment, but you don't think about it at the time. You just deal with the scenario that's presented in front of you, because the way you're trained, and you just learn to deal with problems, you learn to handle the scenario and just deal with it. Then later you're like, oh, wow, that sucked. But
that's a phenomenal lesson, Matt, for just like anybody in life. Like, what do they call it in the military? And pardon me, because I'm going to curse here, but when you're in the shit, you just got to get through it, right? I mean, you don't stop to think about the situation you're in. You problem solve the situation you're in, I would imagine. I mean, I've never been in anything even remotely close to anything like ISIS. I think I've been in a fender bender. That's probably the biggest, problem solving situation I've been in the real world. But so there's different levels, obviously, when you're talking ISIS versus an auto accident, but you just kind of navigate your way through it. And then you decompress and you debrief and stuff. And, what does that look like? I imagine even then it doesn't stop once you get through it. I would think you're like, okay, well, how do we prevent this from happening next time?
Oh yeah, that's, you nailed it. That's probably one of the biggest parts and the most important parts of aviation, especially in a training environment, because what we want to prevent is lessons observed. We want lessons learned. So like, we don't want to just do the same thing over and over again and be like, oh, dang it, we did it again. Because, not to sound melodramatic, but like, we're talking about destruction of property and loss of life here. Like, this is a big deal. So in the debrief, you show up with data, like no kidding, cold hard truth data, not, I did look good. Like, that doesn't cut it. That doesn't work. And then in the debrief in the Air Force and the Navy, and I'll assume in the Marine Corps and the Army as well, I haven't worked with them as much, but I'm confident it's the same way. The rank comes off in the debrief. So, if you're flying with the guy that's in charge of the whole base and he screws up royally, you tell him he screwed up royally. But this is the art side of it, and a lot of the coaching side as well, where if a guy keeps missing a block or keeps getting beat on a block, you don't say, hey, you suck at football, you should go, look at the bowling team, get out of here. You say, no, your technique is this. Let's work on that technique. Yes, you got your ass kicked. That doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're a bad football player. Your technique needs work. So that's where you become a really, truly effective instructor, because if you just point out people's flaws, like, they're going to get resentful And more importantly, they're not going to get anything out of that. So you show up with that data, you analyze the data, and then you get fixes from that in a specific, do this next time so that you don't repeat those errors.
That's awesome, man. That's a beautiful way to put it too, because what you're starting to see in terms of this conversation alone, the similarities in football, like you highlighted, with the military, specifically Air Force in this instance. And it's not like operating on feelings. It has to be objective metrics, right? Like, well, I feel like they're in cover 2. Yeah, go ahead and feel like they're in cover 2, but then they switch to some type of zone coverage and they pick you off because they had somebody dropping when you weren't expecting. So it's like, you have to be precise in your measurements, right? And like, I think that's a great way to word it as far as, basically looking at technique, because you can't write a guy off, as I'm sure when you're mid-air or mid-combat mission, someone's, not pulling their weight, you're going to write them off mid-air. No, you have to navigate the circumstances. And so, I mean, I'm sure you worked with folks contributing of all different types of competencies, and all different types of skill sets, and you kind of have to adapt on the fly. That's football, right? That's life. And as an instructor, this was kind of one of the things I wanted to ask. I'm sure you have to flag those scenarios, like the one when your single engine was working against you. You flag these fringe cases. I don't know if that's a fringe case, but in the instances there are fringe cases, you flag them and you have to instruct to those, I would imagine, right? Just similar to like what I do in radiology. There are so many things that constantly pop up that you're like, oh man, okay, so we need to be mindful of when the order comes through to look for X, Y, and Z on this next case that's similar, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I assume, I have no experience in radiology, but you don't pat yourselves on the back when things go well. You try to learn from when things get screwed up. And the military is like that too. There's a lot of really successful missions or, good whatever, but you naturally focus on the screw ups. So I can think of specific missions that the community still references that were 10 years ago because guys didn't say something at a critical juncture or whatever, and resulted in a tragic result for American forces or whatever it may be. But it's always an interesting thing because you work with a bunch. It's very similar to a football team. A lot of type A, very intense winners. Everyone that makes it to the point where they're flying a combat mission, I don't care what you're flying, or you're on the ground, if you're involved in combat operations, is a winner. You know what I mean? They're a stud. Varying levels of stud, but they are a stud. So nobody wants to be the weak link in the chain. Ugly side of that is when everybody is that high speed and ready to go, and you can be like, how could you do that? You can get a little direct and personal. That's not helpful for anybody. Like when someone screws up, they know they screwed up. If they don't know they screwed up, that's a different thing. But if they screwed up, you've beaten them over the head with it, does not help. Look at what went wrong. Everyone's professional enough to like, all right, let's look at this. Let's get your perspective. Let's get the data and let's learn from it. Let's not repeat it again. And if it's a technical fix, okay, let's get the piece of equipment that can help fix that. If it's a procedural thing, let's write our rules differently. If you just messed up the execution of it, how? And then you take it all the way back to figure out where what's known as the root cause happened. And then how do we attack that root cause? And then you got to spread the word on that, because I'd be probably like you've seen too, just because I happen to be the one that either got caught or I screwed up, there's 20 other guys that did the same thing and nothing happened. So you got to get the word out there, and you can't have so much pride in your own personal performance or whatever that you're not willing to take that or spread that word. So
there's a great I was talking to someone, I can't remember, and I was like, I think he's succeeding in spite of his preparation. And it's like the same thing. You can succeed in spite of your technique in a play, as I'm sure you can succeed on a mission in spite of your execution. I mean, it's all pivotal. But Matt, you have a really good perspective, and you're a one of one, I would say. Like, I mean, there are a lot of people there's a very small minority, I would say, who've both played collegiate ball at a high level, Division I, and then also entered the military and ascended to a high level and have done spec ops. I mean, there are them, but there's not that many. So would you say football augmented your perspective as a leader in military as well? Or would you just say like there are people in military with your perspective all over the place?
I would say football helped, but I wouldn't say it was just because of football. The percentage of athletes, collegiate athletes, is pretty small. They are out there though. But I've seen plenty of people that are phenomenal aviators or otherwise that, you know, never played sports. They're musicians or whatever it may be. But what did help for sure was learning that when Luke Meadows is screaming in my face that he doesn't dislike me, he wants me to do the best that I can, and he's going to help me get there. Those people that aren't used to that, and I'm not saying I'd get in guys' faces and scream at them and throw my hat at them or my visor like Luke used to wear, but you need to be able to separate. Just because I don't tell you you did a fantastic job on everything when what you really did was garbage, that I don't dislike you. You know, I like you as a human being, as an individual, but that performance was not up to speed. So let's get you there. You know, there's that. That's probably the biggest thing that helps in sports, especially at high level sports, because you're around a bunch of really good players and you have to get the little stuff right. You really do, because the little things is what makes the difference. You add up all the little things, it's a big thing. So
no, that's
that
well
I think
put,
probably had to, that was probably the biggest help, because geez, when I was learning to fly, like there's a lot of young kids, like 22 years old, fresh college graduates starting pilot training. And most of the guys that go to Air Force pilot training, and I say guys, I'm not trying to be gender biased here, so
sure.
you can take all the hate mail from any females. That's my
I know you. I can vouch for you. You're not discriminatory
Thanks.
on those grounds.
On those grounds, unless you're a basketball player.
There's other grounds.
Kidding,
yeah, exactly.
Kidding.
Soft basketball players.
I'm kidding. But no, for real, like most of the people have been very successful. Like I knew a guy, and I honestly felt really bad for him. He'd been a good athlete. He went to the Air Force Academy and then was one of the top graduates there, which is very tough. Got sent to get a master's degree from MIT, which he got like a 4.0 on. And he sucked at flying. He just did. It just wasn't his thing. Well, that was the first time in his life he hadn't been great at everything. It's something he tried. He didn't really know how to deal with that. And it's kind of ironic. Like this guy was literally set up to be an astronaut, and he was having trouble like landing the plane, which is a big deal. Had to kind of work on that. You know, that's more of the art side. He struggled because his brain was very, you know, math and science, X plus Y equals good landing. And I'm like, well, yes, you're nailing all these parameters, but I always say, like, read a book about how to paint. You're not going to learn until you start to paint. You know?
Oh yeah.
So
what's that Robin Williams movie where Dead Poet Society, where he's going through, you know, the guy talks about how to write poetry and like
right.
He starts ripping it up. It's like, that's
right.
the thing. Like theory can only get you so far, you know? And that's kind of
right.
like, I'm a very analytical mind. So I'm starting to realize, like, I think you can quell anxiety or any like excessive thought with consistent action. And that's going to be the best way to do it, to just get out and force yourself into the situation, no matter what it is, and learn as a result of stubbing your toe, you know?
Yeah.
So what's the coolest plane you've flown? You talked us through some of them. What's the most badass piece of equipment, technology you've been behind?
Oh man. Well, it depends. No, but for real, like if you were going to come down and you're like, the Air Force said, here, go fly whatever you want and have fun. And I had 1 hour, I'd take you up in an F-15 and we'd go rage and have a good time. I was a part of what's known as the Armed Overwatch demonstrations, a new airplane that Special Operations Command's getting. I got to fly all those and learn all those and get to see what some of the modern technology is. And those were really cool. One thing that kind of blew my mind is some of the controls were literally an Xbox controller, and they handed it to you. And like, you're controlling military stuff on an Xbox controller, which I thought was stupid until I did it. And I was like, I've been playing Xbox for 20 years and I picked it up like that. Maybe it's pretty smart, you know? So that was really cool too.
And plenty of Guitar Hero.
Oh man, you put a Guitar Hero thing back there, I'm set.
At Schroeder and Ponch's house, like on repeat.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So funness would be the F-15 for sure. mission and getting to make an impact would be the U28. That's not a slight to the F15 or anybody else at all. It's just that happened to be where the fight was at the time, and I was very lucky to be involved in that. Yeah, there's so much out there. I mean, dude, the first time I soloed a Cessna was like, I remember looking at the instructor seat, like, there's nobody over there. How's this thing flying? I don't think it worked that way. Same thing in a T6 or T38. Like, flying, it just beats having a real job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just fun. It's just a fun job.
I can only imagine.
And so, yeah.
I get a little nervous with some flights, like on some of the turbulence, but, knowing the competency you have to have as a pilot, to fly commercial airliners and what you've got, I'm sure, we're all in good hands. I want to do something kind of different that we've never done. Are you down? Cause you're a Top Gun guy. You're an aviator by trade. Let's do a quick rapid fire round where I just say words relative to South Dakota State or what we've talked about, and you give me your first thought.
All right, kind of like a verbal Rorschach test. All right, let's do
it. I guess, yeah. That's
right.
cool. You can't nervous. Think about it. You just have to react.
Yeah,
you're in mid-air combat, okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
All right. Coughlin Alumni Stadium.
Corey Koenig on that run to win the game. Just popped in there.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. South Dakota State University.
Handsome alumni. No, just kidding.
Thank you.
No, it's great. I can't think of other adjectives besides fantastic. Good at thesaurus, fantastic, all of those.
Jackrabbits.
Hard work. Like just hard-working people. And I mean beyond the football team. I remember seeing the volleyball team and the basketball team and the wrestling. Everybody's just working their butt off all the time.
Nice. Brookings.
Love it. Didn't think I would. Love it. Love the place. Nice. Great place. Yeah.
Rapid City.
Beautiful. Just a beautiful area.
Nice. The military.
It's interesting. I'm failing the game because I'm not giving you rapid fire. Duality. How about that? Because there's been a lot of awesome things. The military has poured, I don't even know how many millions of dollars into training me and giving me awesome experiences. But I mean, I've spent just in deployed time about a couple years away from home. And then that's not counting all the trips and all that stuff. And like when my second daughter was born, I was deployed like 10 days later. It is what it is. You got to do your job, right? And shout out to, if there's any military spouses out there, you talk about the unsung heroes. Like my wife, friggin' stud, just deals with it, and it's not fun. Like that's not fun we got 3 kids now and they got gymnastics and they got appointments and they got all this stuff. And I'm like, hey, honey, I got to go do this thing. Okay. I can't say no. That's how it works. But the military spouses out there are just, I can't say their praises enough. They do not get enough credit. You can't give them enough credit. Everyone's very thankful for the service of the military members, and that's, we appreciate that. But the spouses and families, the kids, they get a lot asked of them. Like we volunteer, they didn't necessarily volunteer for all that. So
yeah,
I'd be remiss if I didn't, shout them out.
Beautifully put. We'll bring it a little lighter now. Larson Commons.
Ha! Oh man. So here's an interesting one. You remember Ray Day?
Oh yeah.
Ray was a good friend of mine. I remember eating in Larson's with Ray, Luke Graving, shout out to Luke Graving, and Danny Batten for some reason. And we always had the rice with the leftover eggs. It was all put together.
Oh yeah. Helen, shout out to Helen.
Shout out to Helen. But that popped in there, but I like Larson.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't, Wolfgang Puck, but it was good. It was great for a 19-year-old.
Hey, man,
but I remember eating with Ray all the time.
Needed to fuel. It was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Frost Arena.
Wrestling. is actually, I went to more wrestling events than the basketball events, even though I did go to like the women's WNIT and went to basketball games and stuff. But I remember going to wrestling duels, and I am incredibly proud of how much the wrestling team has improved, developed, whatever you want to say. Oh my gosh.
From Bono to Han now to the expanded facilities they're getting, to everybody putting a financial backing behind them, to Chad running this takedown segment that we have on our podcast. It's really cool. I mean, and it's right in the heart of, what wrestling country is in the Midwest, the upper Midwest. So no, it's just been exciting to see them, and obviously be a part. Is only D1 in wrestling, like D1 and D2. And then, so on down the line, there's no subdivision within it. Within D1. So to be a part of the Big 12, which is a notable wrestling conference, is pretty spectacular. So that's cool.
Oh, yeah.
Last couple here. All right. So the USA.
Oh, man. I love America. And I think, I'm not saying it's perfect, but what you can do in this country, and I don't care who you are, where you're from. Let me put you this way. My dad was a one of six. His dad worked in a meat packing plant. His mom didn't work. He took advantage of, he was in the Air Force, and within a single generation went from being one of six living in an unheated home, type thing, to being a Air Force retired Air Force officer and a airline pilot that significantly jumped up the social ladder via hard work in 1 year or in one generation. So that the opportunity is there, and that's not unique. I know a lot of people that have done that, and I love this country. It's definitely not perfect, but it does a lot of really good things throughout the world. That doesn't sell newspapers, but there's a lot of good things that America does.
If you're willing to hunt for it, it's there. I couldn't agree more. Coach Moore.
Stud. Freaking love Coach Moore. I hope whatever he wants, I hope he gets, and I think he will get it, because he's a rare blend of charisma, knowledge. He just nails it all the way down the list.
Relatability. It's been really cool to watch. To see. And man, he's a damn good special teams coach.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, not only tight end, but that's what jumps to mind to me. Like, he really has some range, which is nice. Yeah, no, I agree as well. All right, last one here, because you've kind of touched on some of it with some of the other rapid fires, but we wanted to have you on leading up to 4th of July. What does 4th of July mean to you?
It means my neighbors get annoyed at me because I'm working around with American flag headband. I got my kids out in the street. We're doing sparklers and all that stuff, and they're rolling their eyes. But love them. The 4th of July, just America. Same answer with America.
Let's go.
It's great. Let's go. Indeed. So.
Yeah, man. Yeah, well, Matt, thank you so much. This has been one of my favorites. It's very insightful, and this is not lip service. It's wild talking to people where. My mom told me I was special, but then you deal with people who actually had special in their name, special ops. So appreciate you in your service. Appreciate you being a teammate and having a warm spot in your heart for Jackrabbit Athletics and jumping on the pod, man. So with that, go big, go blue, go Jacks.
Go Jacks.